to the session, remote debriefing. So the world as we knew it changed, didn't it? About March or April of 2020. And, up until that point, the party line from human synergistics, when we're thinking about LSI debriefing, and certainly the first session, was always, you need to move heaven and earth to do these things face to face. That was very much our kind of party line. We couldn't really imagine that it would be as effective not doing it that way. But of course, things changed in a big hurry, and we needed to rethink that. And I guess what I want to say is someone up front, as someone who, up until 12 months ago had never attempted to do debriefs remotely, it works. It's fine. And perhaps, we needn't have had the concerns that we had because this work is 100% doable, even if you're not in the same room as the person that you're taking through their data. So it's all good. What I will say, and I'll probably say this a few times as we go through today, for me anyway, the two kind of things I've noticed in terms of the difference of doing this work face-to-face versus remotely is, firstly, it seems to take me a little bit longer to do it remotely. So if you're someone who would typically use, a good 2 hours to do an initial LSI debrief, this might take you 2 hours and 10 minutes kind of thing. It just seems to take a little bit longer. If you're someone who pretty much gets through them in an hour and a half or so, you may well find it's, an hour and 45 minutes. So that's just one little observation from me off the bat. That might just be me, but it just does seem to take me a little bit longer. I'm imagining because I'm sort of taking extra time to explain things to people, perhaps holding things up, so that they can see them, etc. So it just seems to take a little bit longer. The other thing I would say is you just need to be a little bit more prepared than you otherwise might. Now, I'm normally someone who's fairly prepared anyway, but even for me, I just found myself having to kind of think through some of the logistical stuff in advance and in more detail than perhaps I used to. So it's just not as simple as picking up the bundle of materials and heading off to a meeting room. You do need to think through what are the bits and pieces that I want people to have. Do I have a strong preference for them to have them in hard copy form in the session, or am I going to use the various soft copy pieces that have been developed? What's my preference? What are the materials I'm going to use? And thinking that through in advance. And if I'm deciding I want to have them using hard copy materials, then I've got to line all those ducks up in advance and making sure that, people have actually received materials in advance and all of those pieces. So I'll talk more about that as we go through, but they're really the two key things that I've discovered, being a bit more prepared, and perhaps it's going to take you just a few minutes longer than it otherwise might. The good news is, other than that, it's exactly the same. So from a process perspective, nothing's going to change really in terms of how you might navigate your way around an LSI debrief. So I've got a slide deck here in front of me. This is loaded up on the Accredited Practitioner portal. I'll show you where a little bit later, but I'm just really going to be talking through these slides. When COVID first hit, we wanted to get as much support out to you guys for doing this work remotely, as quickly as we could. And so the development of this little slide deck was pretty much the first thing we did, actually. So this has been around for about 12 months or so now. And very much it was the early stages of COVID, and we were just trying to sort of predict how these things might go and what sorts of questions people might have. So, a little bit down the track now, and some of this is just becoming second nature for us. So I guess just have a look at the slide deck through that lens. It was developed in the early days of COVID. There might be some of this stuff that, is now kind of common sense, but in the early days of COVID, we didn't know what we didn't know. So that was the basis on which this was put together. So there's the initial slide here is really almost just like an index slide. It's just got the bits and pieces there, the order of the presentation in a way, right? And I should also say, any of this material that's like this and the other bits and pieces that, they're all there for you to use however you want to use them, right? So we've just loaded lots of bits and pieces up for you on the Accredited Practitioner portal, including this slide deck. And, you make of it what you will. You can use it however you want. But that first slide, 1 to 6, it's really just almost the index of the presentation. So the next slide that I want to show you is a broad 5-step process. So this really does kind of capture the rest of the presentation. So we've got each of these 5 pieces will be represented on a slide, but it's also just kind of mapping out what we saw as a process, not so much or not specifically the process of a debrief, but all the bits and pieces around it. So getting yourself ready to do a remote debrief, all of the logistics around all of that, the preparation that I referred to before, then the actual debrief, and then some bits and pieces post debrief. Again, we developed this really right out of the gate when COVID first hit. We actually built this particular page almost as a bit of a checklist. You can see there's little boxes there. I think what we imagined, maybe some folks like me who like checklists and to-do lists, I think we kind of thought, people may in fact print this one page out and kind of tick things off as they do it. So that's the purpose behind the design of this. So it maps out the 5 steps, but it's also got little check boxes there. Look, you'll either use it in that way or you won't, but nonetheless, it just maps out the kind of 5 steps. So what we'll do now is just work through all of this and just cover off each of these 5 as we go through. So the first step is the getting ready step. So this is the stuff I alluded to at the start of this presentation when I talked about, and this is just my experience, right? It may not be everyone's, but I was finding I needed to do a bit more prep, mainly around logistical kind of stuff, logistical considerations, more so than I used to, all right? So again, in the early days of COVID, this was sort of like, oh, wow, we need to think about this kind of stuff, whereas, we've been doing this stuff for quite some time now. So some of this has probably become obvious, but it wasn't obvious, when COVID first hit. And so logistics, if you're doing a remote debrief, it's useful to figure out in advance where actually will your client be, because it's an assumption that they'll be at work. As we know, they may not be. So are they going to be joining you from their office or from home or from a friend's place? Who knows? In this world of working remotely, people could be anywhere. Now, that's really important, of course, to find out if you're going to ship materials to people. Where actually will they be? We don't want to have materials just sent off to the office and actually it's a working from home day for them. So that's a part of it. Obviously we need to confirm all their contact details, but it's a useful question to cover off well in advance. Where will they actually be? And if you're wanting materials sent, you need to talk to your Human Synergistics account manager to make sure they've got the correct address of where it is that you want materials to go to, and that you're having that conversation with enough lead time. The account managers are very, very accommodating. They will give you whatever support you need, but you've got to kind of help them out, by thinking it through in advance. What is it that you want shipped and packaged up, and where is that actually going to go? Another good question is, what platform will we be using? We discovered in our early days, once COVID hit, that there were some organisations, I guess it's their kind of IT requirements, that had certain views around certain platforms and whether they wanted to use them or not. So, for instance, Zoom was a good example. In the early days, we did get some pushback from some of our larger corporate clients around, we do not want to use Zoom. So just because it's the platform that you're familiar with and you want to use, don't make that assumption that that's what we're actually going to be using, because your client, may have different rules around all of that in terms of their IT requirements. So again, you've got to, cover that off in advance so what we'll be using. And again, maybe a little bit down the track now, this is all becoming second nature for us. But certainly in the early days, if we were finding out it was a platform that we were not familiar with, then it's not a bad idea to have a bit of a practice. So as a part of your preparation, well before the debrief, if it's not a platform you're familiar with, then really don't kind of be having your practice live during a debrief. You might need to send a meeting request to your partner or one of your kids or the dog or whatever. It doesn't really matter, but just actually having a bit of a practice was something that we found quite important. You don't want to be experimenting with it in the middle of the session. So that's kind of an example of the bits and pieces that fall under this getting ready phase. But it's the stuff that I did allude to before, where you have to sit down in advance, think this through, and make sure you've got all the ducks lined up, that you've got all the materials where you want to have them, etc., and you're familiar with the platform you're using, and all of that. So that's pretty much covering off the getting ready step. I will be showing you shortly, some of the virtual formats of some of the kit, some of the bits and pieces that you might use during an LSI debrief, and we've been working steadily to try to convert those into a virtual format, and I'll be showing you where they are. But that's another part, I guess, of the whole getting ready, isn't it? What are the bits and pieces that you would normally use in an LSI debrief? For instance, do you use the one pager? Do you use the LSI cards? Do you use the profile supplement for the drawing up of the raw scores, etc.? You need to get clear what will be your strategy, and are those bits available, in an online virtual form, or are they not? Even if they are available, is it your preference to use them, or actually you still want to use the hard copy form? These are all considerations in that getting ready stage. So, okay, let me just move on to the next bit. All right, so step 2, this is something that we did, start to do sort of as a matter of sort of procedural, habit, I guess, that we got into with COVID. And that is reaching out to people in advance to just kind of cover off the logistical stuff, And so this might be a 2-minute phone call or even an email exchange, or if you're unfamiliar with the platform, this might be an opportunity to test it, just to have a quick 5-minute, Zoom meeting or whatever it is that you're going to be using. But we found it's useful to reach out to people in advance. We want to check, have materials arrived? So if you're someone that's using hard copy materials, don't discover midway through your session that these things haven't arrived. So, we want to reach out to people in advance. You might want to reach out and again, just check what's the platform, check that we've got the times all correct. Simple things like if you're going to get them to colour up, hard copy form, from the raw scores, colouring up from on the profile supplement, then they're going to need to have a set of red, green, blue textures, things like that, little logistical considerations. But you can cover that off, in a pre-session briefing, either phone call, email, or whatever. But just sort of reaching out to people, we just found that's useful. Again, this was sort of in the early days of COVID, but we've still kept this up. By and large, we're still connecting with people in advance. It just seems to make the session run a little bit smoother if we've covered some of that stuff off. A simple thing too, if you don't already have it, probably you will, but if you don't, it's a good opportunity to swap mobile numbers with the person. And the reason we found that helpful is, as technology doesn't always play ball with us, does it? So you might get into the actual debrief live and things are not working for you. As a minimum, at least if you've got each other's mobile numbers, if the internet drops out and you lose connection during your debrief, you can at least reach out to people and, reschedule or chat through, what we're going to do to try to rectify it, etc. So simple little thing, right? But we just found that really crucial. Don't start your debrief without having swapped mobile phone numbers. And again, that's something you can do in the setup. Now, what we did discover is, and it sort of talks to my point before, these things can take a little bit longer. Because they take a little bit longer, if you have decided that you want to reach out to people in advance, for this kind of pre-briefing session, you may want to decide to make it a little bit longer. So it's not just a 2-minute phone call. Make it a little bit longer, and you can cover off some of the positioning stuff, perhaps. So some of my colleagues, prior to, not the pieces when we get into data, but all of the setup stuff, they were using it as an opportunity to do some of that as well. And that then has the advantage of buying you a little bit of time when you actually get into the debrief itself. So if you're someone that sort of thinks, yeah, that might be attractive to me, this next slide here just shows you what you might do in that pre-briefing stuff. So as well as all the logistical stuff that I've pinpointed a minute ago, you might want to talk to them a little bit more in more detail around the whole process of the debrief. The cover off the history of the LSI, maybe introduce them to the circumplex, etc., etc. Some of the rapport building kind of stuff. Who are they? What's going on for them at the moment? All the stuff that you would traditionally do at the start of a debrief. Some of that lends itself to being knocked off, covered off in this kind of preliminary call. So anyway, that's purely an option. That's just purely an option. But we do, we do pretty much in all cases reach out to people in advance now. Generally speaking, for me, it's really just covering off the logistical stuff and sort of introducing myself. So it's a 5-minute piece, but there is the option there. If you're sort of a bit squeezed for time, then you could cover off some of the kind of what we'd call setup stuff prior to data in that same call as well. So up to you. And if that's something that you want to do, then this little checklist might help with that. Going to the next slide, this says sort of few days before and on the day of the debrief, but either or, right? But we do want to confirm, if we haven't done it yet, we want to confirm materials have arrived. So that's that. And on the day itself, again, we've discussed earlier that our clients could be anywhere and not necessarily at their office, but same applies to you. You may not be at work either. You might be dialing in from home or whatever. So again, in the early days of COVID, this was stuff that, is now kind of common sense, but it probably wasn't, back in March and April of 2020. But simple things like, where will you be when you do this session? Who, if you're going to be working from home that day, who else is there? What are some likely distractions that would not be helpful? And how do you kind of manage that? I was kind of lucky, I suppose. I had the option of coming into the office. Office in North Sydney, and that worked better for me because I had 2 other adults at home trying to work from home, and we had the dog who developed a great habit of barking his head off right in the middle of a difficult point in an LSI debrief or something. So I just kind of thought, what, I can do without all that, and so I tended to come in. If I had debriefs to do remotely, I would try to come into the office and just lock myself in a meeting room somewhere. You might not have that option. You might still be working from home, but it's just important to sort of figure out for you what's going to work best. Just get yourself set up, try to minimize the dog barking and the courier coming and all of that sort of stuff that's going to just be a painful distraction, and so that you can be totally present for the session. You guys know that how important that is. So it's not just going to happen. You've actually got to think it through. So that's all of that. Simple things like, my mobile phone's charged. I've got the person's number, so that, if it sort of all goes pear-shaped technology-wise, we're going to be able to connect on the phone and all of that. Okay, so that's that. I want to just move into the next bit, which is the doing the debrief itself. Here's where I want to digress a little bit and just take you to the Accredited Practitioner portal. So I'm just going to log in here to mine. And so the reason I want to digress here now from our slides is just to show you, in case you haven't seen it, some of the bits and pieces that we've been working on since COVID hit under the heading of, trying to get some support out to you guys and try to, make it possible and as easy as possible to do this work remotely. So we have been busily loading up some resources for you in the Accredited Practitioner portal as we've built them, and so I just wanted to make sure everyone knew where that is. So I've logged into the Accredited Practitioner portal, and the very first banner you'll see is this thing that's called Virtual Debrief Pack. So that's new. So when I say new, at the start of COVID, we built that, and we have just been progressively putting bits and pieces in there. So as soon as you log on, that's the first banner that you see now. And if you click on it, it just takes you to some bits and pieces that you might find helpful. And I'll just talk about a few of these. Now, this slide deck that I'm working through, that is one of them. So it's here. Remote debriefing, it's the file there. So that's where you would access these slides. But what we've been doing, progressively over the last few months is trying to convert some of our key pieces of kit, the bits and pieces that come with the whole package, resources, trying to convert them into electronic form so that you can, email them to people essentially, or go to share screen and show them to people, right? So the fact that we've done this, I don't want it to people to assume that you have to use these. All right, this has just been about giving you choices so you can choose whether you want to use the hard copy stuff. I do. It's my preference, but again, you've got to make sure you've got enough lead time to ship them out to people. But if Australia Post has let you down or something, or you just didn't have enough time, then we don't panic, because pretty much everything is available in electronic form. Or it could be that actually is your preference. You don't particularly want to use the hard copy stuff and worry about all that. You'd rather just do it electronically. So anyway, you've got a choice, right? It's not just because we've done the work and developed some of this stuff in this way does not mean you have to use it. So one of the bits and pieces I just want to show you, just as an example, is the Circumplex one-pager. So if we click on that link, there it is. So that's a soft copy version of the Circumplex one-pager. So I don't know about you, but I always use these, right? So I will always use the one-pager A4 Circumplex one-pager in my setup for an LSI debrief. But here it is electronically. So you can just simply email it to the person, or, do share screen, whatever works for you. So that one is there. There's a little footnote down at the bottom here that references the self-development guide, and a new piece of kit called the Action Planning ebook. It says contact your account manager for that. So let's talk about the self-development guide first. So the self-development guide, the book that comes with LSIs. So that is available now in electronic form, and it's actually a flip book. But I guess because of the fact that it's our IP, we wanted to just sort of limit, or we didn't want a broad circulation of that. So we're happy to give it to you in electronic form, which you can then forward on to your clients, but you've got to contact us first. So again, there's another kind of logistical piece to consider. If you want to use the electronic flip book version of the self-development guide, contact your account manager. They send you a password protected link, which you will then send on to your client, and it just operates as a flip book. It's exactly the same document, it's just in electronic form, and people can click on the little arrow at each page and it turns the page. So that's that one, self-development guide as we know and love it to be. It's just that it's in electronic form. The other reference there is to a thing called the Action Planning ebook. That's a new piece of kit. So that was developed through COVID, and it's just simply an action planning template. Again, it works as an ebook, so people can actually populate it directly from their computer, or you could print it out and just write in it. So it's an action planning and reflections document. It's about half a dozen pages. It's just got some key questions on it. Just helps people move from awareness, so it's used sort of post the initial session, awareness through to acceptance and action. So quite a good piece of kit. It's a new piece. Talk to your account manager again, and they will send it to you with a password protected link that you can then forward on you. The other bit I wanted to show you while I was here is the profile supplement. So you won't find it here. You find it under the projects heading. I'll go there in a sec. But so the profile supplement is for times when we want to get the person to draw it up from their raw scores, draw up their circumplex from their raw scores. Now, even though we're in COVID times and we're doing this stuff remotely, you can still do it the old-fashioned way, and I tend to do that. So I just make sure the person has got the hard copy at their end, profile supplement. I've told them to get a set of red, green, blue textures, and away we go, But if that's not going to work for you, we have developed this new piece of kit here. It's an automated electronic version of the profile supplement. So you find it, you go to projects, and the last tab there, down at the bottom, it says Virtual Profile Supplement. And then what happens, these are sort of one use only, right? So the system is going to want to ask you for which project or for what human do you want to actually do this for? So you've got to just find them. So, I'm just scrolling through mine, and there's lots there. But essentially, You'll scroll through until you find the client that you want to do the work for, and then you'll see it next to their name, essentially. It has an option called Create Link. So you'll just hit on that Create Link button, and when you do that, it gives you then 3 options. So one option is, do you want to copy the link to a clipboard? Second option is, do you want to email it to the participant, as in, right now directly, or do you want to open it in another tab? And so I would generally, if I'm going to use this, I'll send it to them in an email, but I like to time when I'm sending the email. So for me, I use the copy link to clipboard, and then I paste it in the body of an email, which I'll send, at the appropriate point. If you hit the email link to participant, that's fine too, but it will go straight away. So, use that one if you are literally ready now to do your colouring and plotting. Otherwise, you can just, pre-loaded into a body of an email, which you'll send later. So we've hit the Create Link button. Once we've found the client that we want to do this for, we'll hit Create Link, and then we get the 3 options there. Just for purposes of demonstration, 3 options being copy it to a clipboard, which we can then paste into an email later, email it directly to the person, which would happen right now. So that's okay if you're ready to do that. And there's the other one that just says open it up. So I'm just opening it up for purposes of demonstration. So we get a blank LSI1. So, number of ways to do this, but you have likely emailed this link to the person already. And as you know, you can download, this isn't just a COVID thing, this has been the case for ages, but you can download a soft copy of reports and also the raw score pages. And so you can, either do share screen on the raw score pages and the person can work through it, or perhaps you've just emailed that to them as well. That's what I tend to do, email them their raw scores as well as the link here. And then so simply the person will start with, raw score number 1 for style number 1, humanistic encouraging, find where it is, hover over it with their mouse and just click, and the thing starts to populate as they go all the way around. So you can see what's happening. They're working from the raw scores at their end and building the circumplex. All right. And so once we've got to that, and we will then, do with that what we will, whatever your normal process is there, and then we can come down and there's the option to do it again for the LSI2. So, okay, so that's that. And now again, just because that exists, that's not meant to imply, that's how you have to do it. All right, so it's just about giving you choices. So you might actually have already organised for the person to have the hard copy profile supplement there, and you've emailed them the raw scores, or maybe even that in hard copy is at their end. So, whatever way, there's a number of ways to do it. Just wanted to show you that you've got the option there. All right, so we're into this step 4, which is doing the debrief. All right, so I just wanted to show you what's available on the Accredited Practitioner Portal that'll help you, and so there's a number of ways that you can do all of this. Now, with the reports themselves, I mentioned it just a second ago, but I just want to stipulate that again. If we've got enough time, so if your account managers have got enough lead time, they are quite happy to bundle up whatever it is that you want bundled up and sent to the client, and that includes the reports, so the hard copy reports. And if you're worried about the client, having access to those in advance and opening them up, what we do is bubble wrap the whole thing, and we put stickers on it saying, please don't open this until instructed to do so by your LSI debriefer. So look, that's not a guarantee, cast iron guarantee the person isn't going to rip it open, but we reckon, I think people generally will do the right thing and not open it. So anyway, that's a possibility, but again, you've just got to talk to your account manager in advance to organise that. Or if you're nervous about that, then, as you know, you've got the soft copies available in your portal. So you just download them and you then email them to people at the appropriate time. And so there's a couple of ways to do this as well. So when we are into the, let's look at your reports type section, what I do is I have it already downloaded in advance. So again, as a part of my prep, I've already got it kind of sitting in my drafts in my emails. So I've downloaded it. I do 2 emails, one for LSI 1, one for LSI 2. But that's just me. You don't have to do it that way. And I email it at the appropriate point. So that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is to just open it at your end and use share screen. So you're sharing it in that way and taking the person through their report, and then ultimately you can email it, at the end of the session or whatever. So either way, right? Email it in advance, or just don't email it till the end and use share screen. I prefer to send it to them, and then I don't actually use share screen. So I open their report at my end, and if you can picture this, I'll kind of have both views going. So I've kind of minimized it, the Zoom piece, so that it's kind of like half of my screen, and I have their report up on the other half. And the reason I do that is I find when I go to share screen, I lose a good visual on the client. Now you can still see them, but it's sort of reduced. Now this could well be talking to my lack of skills with Zoom, right? So I fully accept that. But that's how I do it. I like to have the thing open at my end, have them open it at their end because I've already emailed it to them. And so I'm able to look at them and we're looking at the reports at the same time, and that's how I do it. That's just me. The other option is just go to share screen and just you can just drive it, right? So you'll make up your own mind about all of that. Okay, we'll go to the next. Other than that, as I said at the start of the session, your process does not change. All right, so once you get into it, it's exactly the same. You just got to manage the mechanics of the, using Zoom or whatever it is that you're using, but from the process doesn't change. This little next slide here with the little pictures of people's faces, again, kind of obvious now, common sense. We've been doing this stuff for a while, but March, April of 2020, this was new for everyone. So I guess in terms of your basic debrief process, this is showing you when you might go in and out of share screen. So the initial kind of frame up stuff that we do, the rapport building stuff, explaining the model, you've got a visual on the person. You're not in share screen. It's not really till we get to the reports, LSI 1 and then LSI 2, but then we would come out of share screen for our wrap up, etc. I should just mention, because I didn't mention it earlier, although I've shown you that we've been converting the various bits and pieces of kit into electronic form, there is one that's not yet done, and that's the LSI 1 cards. So if you're a fan, when you get to LSI 1 time, of using the cards and using them live in a debrief, hard copy version only is all that we have at this point in time. So you'll have to just make sure you cover that off, get it to the person in advance, have your own set at your end so you can kind of hold it up and explain it to them. Otherwise, the cards might lend themselves to be a homework task. I've been doing that a bit too, explain it to them, but they'll do it in between sessions 1 and sessions 2, perhaps, as homework. The next slide, I don't really need to take you through that. It's just really highlighting the point that from a process perspective, it doesn't change. So once you're into the debrief, just follow your normal process, So we're going to work through the circumplex, our 5 kind of cuts of the data there, orientations and primary cluster, primary and secondary styles, all of that stuff, nothing different. Then we're going to get into the item by item stuff, 2 styles, maybe 3, depends on how you're going for time. And we've got the pieces at the back of the report, satisfaction items, etc., etc. So, really it doesn't change. When we get to LSI 2, you might have to flip back a little bit, as we do between LSI 1 and LSI 2. And I think that's the bit where you can, it sort of just takes you a little bit longer, maybe, particularly if you're using share screen. You've got to close one, come back to the other one, that sort of stuff. But really, from a process perspective, it doesn't change. So our kind of conversation funnel is exactly the same. Then we have the post debrief bit. So, we have been, more so since COVID than beforehand, signing off with an email. So at the end of the session, just an email that covers off, some of the key points that we discussed, some of that sort of high level insights that might have fallen out of it, but also importantly confirming the next steps, where to from here kind of stuff. It might be the case you've got to email a whole lot of stuff. If you didn't email the reports in the session, you preferred to just do it on share screen, then now you've got to send people their reports as well. Ultimately, people need to get the hard copy stuff. If it's stuff that you've purchased as a part of the kit, if you haven't, either by design or, just sort of the way it worked out, you haven't been able to get the materials to them in advance, then you do need to organise that. There's no point you hanging on to their kit of materials or HS hanging on to them. So, you've got to sort of organise that. Where will the materials get shipped to, et cetera, et cetera. So pretty much common sense, but we are sort of wrapping that up in most cases in a post-debrief email. Okay, now the last part of this little presentation here has really just got, firstly, a couple of slides that are on tips. Now, some of this maybe is a bit redundant now that we've been doing this for ages and it's become second nature, but also some templates. So I referred to, some emails that we might send pre-session, email that we send post-session. So we've just got some of that just to show you as well. Just, feel free to steal it if it's going to be helpful to you. So there's a slide here around technology. I'm probably the last person on the planet to be talking about technology problems. I usually just make a call to someone else to help me. But what we have discovered, again, this was written in early days of COVID, so now it's probably common sense. But if the internet's struggling, if you can at least temporarily get rid of one or other of video or sound, it'll help you usually. All right. So if you're at a point in the process where maybe you don't really need the cameras rolling, you could, and the video and the internet's really clunky and just not behaving, killing the video at where you can is helpful. Just having one or other running, or go the other way. You can kill the audio, and maybe if you've got mobiles, you can call each other and sort of be having a conversation on the mobile while we're looking at reports on the screen, etc. So that's kind of about as good as we got. If it's that bad, you probably do need to reschedule. Or luck might have it, because we have already swapped mobiles and all of that. If we're right at the tail end of it or something, we can perhaps finish it off on the mobile. But otherwise, if you're in the early stages of it and the internet's not behaving, you probably have to reschedule. Okay, so there's just a couple of little tips there that might be helpful. This one is an interesting one. What happens if my client has a negative or strong reaction? It's a challenge, and I don't have any great suggestions here, other than, as a normal matter of course, I am asking now in remote debriefs, pretty much off the bat, and I'm just trying to make it sort of conversationally, where are you today and who else is there? So I'm just asking that up front in a debrief, just so I've got that in the back of my mind, that, they're actually in the office and there might be some other folks around, if someone does, really need some help. Or, no, I'm at home and I'm on my own. Well, at least you kind of know that, I guess, So I'm just asking those questions up front. The only other thing is, I guess it doesn't change our recommendation in terms of we don't want you using this instrument at levels that you're not comfortable using or qualified to use. use. So again, you might just have to call it, if it's going somewhere where you think this is beyond my levels of expertise and qualifications, and look to get the person whatever help you can, refer them to their EAP provider or whatever, but don't sort of bat on with it if it's going to places that you're not trained to deal with. The other one is, just common sense, right? Maybe it makes no sense to continue right now. Let's just stop. And that's perfectly okay. Doing an LSI debrief is never about, you following your process from start to finish. Sometimes we need to be flexible and we call it and we just stop, like we can deal with the rest of it later on, and we can just focus on getting the person, the help that they need, or, at least just stopping the session. So, all right. So that's really about all we got, enough to, other than to say, this stuff is a bit trickier than if you're in the room with the person where you can physically be there. You're not going to be there with a Zoom session. So okay, and the last little bit here, as I said, is just some examples of emails. So there's the pre-brief one. These are just basic templates, right? So just feel free to grab these or cut and paste from them or whatever. So, and there's one there for the post session as well. So that's about it, folks. Thank you for listening to the session today. If you've got questions on any of this stuff, I would suggest your first port of call is your account manager. Remember that they're the ones you've got to go to anyway if you want those links for the self-development guide and the action planning and reflections template. They'll help you out with that. Also, of course, your account manager is going to help you out with shipping of materials, whatever you need, whenever you need it by. They're the folks to talk to. So other than that, we'll sign out for now. Thank you for listening to the session.